Oh, that's okay. Okay, so my name's Daniela Kaufman, and I am a trade lawyer. So I am a regulatory lawyer, so we're going to talk a little bit about cross-border certification. Uh, Obviously, as we're all involved in Canada-U.S. issues, we know that moving things, people, and services across borders inherently can lead to inefficiencies caused by regulatory misalignment. This morning, we looked at a lot of different theories about how to approach and how to address these inefficiencies. And Laura Dawson spoke about incrementalism, which is sort of people on the ground in the private sector doing things to address inefficiencies. This panel is going to focus on two distinct efforts of ad hoc incrementalism related to certification of the workforce. This issue can be really, really huge, but we're going to look very narrowly at certification of the workforce. We're not going to look at how you move those people necessarily from a regulatory perspective back and forth across the border, but we're going to invite Scott Ellsworth up to talk to us about his work at the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. Scott is the principal and owner of Scott Ellsworth Consulting and currently serves as MSSC's senior advisor to Ohio. In this role, he works with government entities, trade associations, community colleges, career tech centers, and employers to understand the value of the MMSC program and CPT credential for their clients, students, and themselves. Scott is the former director of Business Leaders United for Workforce Participation, a Washington, D.C.-based advocacy and education organization that strives to bring employers into the workforce and skills gap discussion. Prior to Blue, for 12 years, Scott was GM and Vice President of U.S. Operations for Tipco Punch, Inc., a Hamilton, Ohio company, which is a multinational manufacturer and distributor of tooling components and special small lot close tolerance machine parts. So Scott really comes to this from the perspective of a manufacturer and on the ground as such. So he will actually be speaking second, and prior to that, we are going to invite Michelle Williams up. Michelle is a product portfolio specialist with the Canadian Standards Association. She actually works in Cleveland, Ohio. She's been with CSA for 9 years, focusing on product development, with her main focus on the development of occupational certification programs. Michelle has worked on developing programs for various industries, including alternative fuels and transportation, medical devices, and skilled trades and sustainability. Prior to her work with CSA, Michelle worked with various local and national trade associations and international professional organizations focusing on membership development. So Michelle is going to inform you about CSA's work and how they work cross-border to develop their certification programs.
Okay, thank you. Can just make sure this. Is this not? Try this way. There we go. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, to be able to speak to something that is truly near and dear to my heart, and that's occupational certification. So before I get started on the whole occupational certification thing, I'd like to just say a bit about CSA Group, because a lot of times when I speak to people, even Canadians, they'll say, what is CSA? So CSA stands for Canadian Standards Association, and yes, we have an office in Cleveland, Ohio, which just seems odd, but CSA is a global organization. Mainly, we are one of the largest independent standards organizations in the world. We publish over 3,000 standards. We also certify and test product. So if you've seen some of these marks that are located on the screen, then you've seen CSA. We are a global organization. We have 37 offices and labs in 14 different countries. Our headquarters, we are headquartered in Toronto. I think we have offices in most of the provinces. And then our headquarters here in the US are in Cleveland. We have offices in Dallas, Charlotte, California. So we are truly global, and we have a great presence in North America. So what happens with CSA is a lot of times industry comes to us and industry tells us that they have a problem. And they know they could come to us because we can offer them solutions. One of the ways we offer them solutions first is by standards. So we publish those standards so that way we could keep people and businesses safe and hopefully free from harm or free from injury. The other way we offer a solution is by testing products to make sure that those products were manufactured according to standard and that people are not harmed in using those products. The third option for a solution that we introduced 9 years ago was occupational certification. And it makes sense. We certify a product to make sure that it works according to standard. So we took that approach and we applied it to the individual. So the individual is certified based on a defined set of competencies where we ask the individual to demonstrate a specific set of skills and knowledge. We do this based on a third-party observation. So CSA here is not the expert, but we work with the experts in order to define that competency, and then we monitor it. And we build our programs around, according to the guidance of ISO ANSI 17024. There's a lot of benefits to occupational certification. One, for the individual, there's greater career options and greater mobility. So if you have a certification, it's a little bit different than a college degree or a college certificate, where every different college or learning institution may have different learning standards. Where this one, you have one set of defined competencies, and if you earn your certification, you have proof that you can, that will hopefully make you more mobile. There's enhanced job mobility, and then improved workforce safety and community safety. What we're doing is when we're testing our occupational, through our occupational certification program, we're testing and we're proving that the certified person meets the qualifications of a minimally qualified candidate. We're not testing them to show that they are the best at their job, but we are testing them to meet a certain level so that they have proof that they should be able to do their job without harming them or without harming others. It also shows that there's an increased knowledge and performance. These people who are earning certification have to show proof that they understand the codes and standards out there and understand the best practices in order to do the job that they're set forth to do. And then the last thing, it enables HR to verify skills and knowledge. It's when a person is certified, they're not being certified because, well, I talked to that person on the phone and gosh darn it, I just think they're the best. So I don't care how they perform on a test, I'm gonna certify them. No, they've been certified by a third party. We've had, that they've been tested against a test that's been validated, it's fair and reliable. So when we develop a certification for an occupation, we do it, it's a threefold process. The first part is we have a scheme committee, and we organize a scheme committee. Like I said, CSA is not the industry expert here, but we gather everybody together, and we help guide the process. So we set a core group of subject matter experts together that include, managers, business owners, government, educators, anybody who is impacted by that industry and has a say in what's going on in that job that we're defining. And we work with that group to define the program definition. And they're the ones that are going to say, this is the program, or this is the industry that we're certifying, this is the job that we're certifying them to, and this is what we believe needs to be done, the qualifications that a person needs to have in order to earn this certification. So that core SCEAM committee will be with us throughout the entire process. And as we move along, we always go back to the SCEAM committee and say, okay, are you on board with this? Is this really still what you think should be happening? And they always sign off on everything. They're the guiding force of it. The second part is SCEAM development. And when we talk about SCEAM development, that's where we pull in everybody else. And when I say everybody else, we pull in people who really do the job on a daily basis. When I work with doing job task analysis, we'll pull together technicians, the ones who do the job on a daily basis. And we always say to them, okay, you're here, you're gonna tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis, what are the main parts of your job, and what are the steps involved with your job. And they'll look at us and say, well, we know you had our boss here because he's sitting on the main committee. And I always laugh, I'm like, yeah, your boss is one thing, but does he really know what you do on a daily basis? And they laugh and they're like, yeah, you're right, he doesn't. So we get the people who do the hands-on work day in and day out, and we ask them to do a job task analysis with us. And then we send that out to industry and say, we had about 20 people up here. They told us what they do. Do you agree with this? And we'll adjust it if we have to. We also get people together within industry who do the job on a daily basis to do exam development. So CSA doesn't write the exam, we let the technicians or we let the people who do the job on a daily basis, they're the ones who write the exam. We help them out, we guide it, we work with a psychometrician to make sure the questions are fair, valid, and reliable. But they really are the ones who write their own certification exam. And then we do a standard setting. So we let the industry say after the exam is done, we let the industry say, okay, set the standard. Here, what do you think, based on these set of questions, where do you think the minimally qualified candidate lies here? And then we do industry validation. We take that, we survey the industry, like I said, to make sure that as we go throughout the steps of development, that industry buys in, or industry agrees with what's been set forth by our SCEAM committee and by the subject matter experts who have helped develop this. We beta test our exam questions. So the exam questions that are written, just because our group around the table may think they're fabulous questions, when we beta test the exam and they're out there, we may not be testing really the way, the items that we really need to be testing. We may not be getting the results that we want. And then we validate those tests. So there's a big whole process around that. Sorry, process. I joke, I speak Canadian. In the US office, it's process, but then I slip and I always say process. So I drive my kids crazy. The implementation of occupational certification. There's a few ways that the implementation for a certification program has to happen. The first thing is individual acceptance. You know, a lot of these people that we're developing certification programs for have already gone through training. They may have gone through university or college. They may have earned a bachelor or a master's degree, depending on what the certification is for. They may have earned a red seal if they're Canadian, or another type of trade association recognition. So now we're asking them to get another form of credential, another proof that they know what they're doing. So we have to get the individual to buy into this, to say, this is important if I want to keep doing my job and I want to prove to people that I am capable and competent. The second part is industry recognition and industry acceptance. If the industry isn't buying into this, the program's not going to go anywhere. We've had a few programs that we've built that industry has come to us and said, yes, we really want this program, build it for us. Unfortunately, it's not like a Kevin Costner movie in Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. We've built programs. People haven't come, even though industry said, oh yeah, we want it. But if industry doesn't do its part to accept a certification, it's not going to go anywhere. And then the third part is government recognition and government adoption. There's no stick. If you don't have a stick, the certification really is going to grow at a slow pace or really go nowhere. We've seen this in the provincial area. For example, we have a medical device reprocessing program, certification program. So the people who clean your medical devices, There's a certification here in the U.S. Run by one of our competitors, but we've developed one specifically for Canada. That program went nowhere until the province of Alberta said, you know what, this is really important. There's too many breaches. Too many people are getting sick because of infections. So they put it in their legislation. So once we got that provincial adoption, it started picking up speed. And now I believe New Brunswick in 2017 is putting it into their legislation. Same thing in the US. We have our CNG Cylinder and Fuel System Inspector Certification Program. So if you're running a vehicle that runs on compressed natural gas, in some of the states, like California, it's not mandated, it's not regulated, but it's just understood if you're going to be working on CNG vehicles, you need to have the CSA certification. But in the state of Utah, they put it into regulation. If you have a CNG vehicle, it must be certified or inspected by a CNG fuel system inspector certified by CSA. We have a program that we've been working on for the past few years, where we've now seen that certification, that mobility, the flexibility and the movement of workers from Canada to the US with our credentialing, with our PC program, and that's with the United Association of Journeymen. We've worked with them to develop a certification for the medical gas piping field. So those are the people who go into a hospital, construction workers, or plumbers and pipe fitters, go into a hospital and they're installing the piping for medical gas. A couple of years ago, there was a mistake that happened in a hospital, and the lines got crossed when they were installing the pipes. And what was oxygen ended up not being oxygen, an explosion occurred, people were hurt. I can't remember if there was anybody killed in that accident. But in that case, what happened was industry came to us and said, okay, we have a big safety problem. So we developed the certification, and we developed it with the intent that the UA has told, they have a US branch or a US partner, and they were told they've developed this program, and their partners in the US will allow their Canadian people who have the CSA credential to come down here and work. And they will accept the credentials here in the US, and vice versa. So we are now seeing our certification being able to cross the border. And that was the whole goal of this certification. So that's what we're working on right now. Same thing with as I mentioned, our CNG Cylinder and Fuel System Inspector certification. Compressed natural gas is growing in Canada, especially as it's being used more and more on heavy-duty vehicles. So we've gotten more people coming from Canada calling us saying, can I use if I earn my certification through CSA in the US, is it applicable in Canada? And it's always been applicable in Canada. But what we're going to be doing now within the next year is actually making sure our certification lines up to both US and Canadian standards to make sure that it is truly a North American certification. And hopefully, more provinces then will look at that and say, you know what, you don't need to be certified by TSSA in Ontario as a gas trades fitter in order to work on a CNG vehicle. If you have the CSA certification, we'll accept that. So there's great opportunities within occupational certification. And that's it. Scott?
So AV guys, if I carry a mic down there, will it cause all kinds of feedback? No. Excellent. Does this one? Oh, yeah. Okay, so you're probably all wondering, where did the candy bars go, right? The candy bars are up here because this is a dead audience. We need a little bit of enthusiasm. Are there any manufacturers out in the group? Oh, there's one. Okay. A little candy for my manufacturing friend. How about Canadians? Oh, I can't give candy to everybody. So pass a little candy out to the Canadians. I apologize in advance if I offend any of you Canadians. I worked for a Canadian company for 13 years, And for 13 years, I was just making fun of them, and they were making fun of me, and we had a lot of fun with it. So if you want a candy bar, you're going to have to answer a question, or you're going to have to laugh at my stupid jokes. Oh, there we go. See? It works well, even when you laugh at that. So she said process, and nobody laughed. I know. I was sad. So why did they ask me, a manufacturer, to come and talk to you guys? Probably because they wanted somebody that would steal the candy bars. Really, the objective of my coming and talking to you is to talk to you a little bit about MSSC, which is the Manufacturing Skills Standards Council. And it's really not that you want to understand what that is. Although I was disappointed in my friend from DC because she couldn't get all of those acronyms right. They talk in acronyms there. What is important is that we talk about how do we harmonize certifications that we have in the U.S. with certifications there are in Canada. And one of the things that is going on right now, and I'm going to walk right into your camera, and I don't mean to. One of the things that's going on right now is there are thousands of certifications here in the U.S. every day that are being made up by community colleges, etc. And so the issue that we all face as manufacturers is, how do I know what somebody knows? And so we're spending a lot of energy, some of us who are certifying bodies are spending a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of money on getting folks to understand what our certification means. It's bad enough to do that within the U.S., but then you've got certifying bodies in Canada as well, and now we're trying to figure out, how do I know what somebody in Canada knows? Now, for me as an employer here in the U.S. that was Canadian-based, we had a Canadian parent company that was our largest supplier. We never took employees from our Canadian parent because we were a small manufacturer. I can imagine on larger companies that they may want people to come across the border. But one of the things that I was asked to talk about is, what do I value as an employer and as a manufacturer? Why would I care that the Canadian employees have the same skill set as my employees, or that American employees have the same skill set as Canadian employees? For my manufacturing friend, he'll understand that ISO, we're all trying to be ISO registered, and with ISO certification, it's all about consistency. We're looking for consistency in process, consistency in product, and all of these things are supposed to assure that our product is a good product. One of the things that we do a really terrible job of is consistency of the people that are making the product. And that's probably the single most important part of that product. Because the people are the one thing that is truly variable. My machine can be very, very consistent, and depending on how I maintain it, it operates the same. But if my friend here that actually did laugh at my joke, and my friend that gave me the scowly look, saying that was a terrible joke, if the two of them don't do things the same way, I'll get a different product. I may be lucky and I may get a solid product, but more than likely I won't. And so the value of doing cross-border certification and of harmonizing certificates between Canada and the U.S. is that we understand what each other knows, that we use consistent processes. And there was a question beforehand, before our group came up, about who should be driving this. I don't want to insult anybody in here, but I will if I have to, but it's not Ottawa and it's not Washington. The people that have to drive this is employers and those of you who work with employers on a regular basis. I see a thumbs up. There's some candy coming your way. See, I love this part of it. So sadly, at this part of the day, normally I'd do this with beer, but you guys have stuff until like 9:30 tonight. So I had to steal the candy instead. So really what we're here to talk about is kind of how that process worked. For us at MSSC, we worked with the Great Lakes Council, and we got together with the Canadian manufacturers and exporters, and I don't know if Jay Myers is here yet. If he's not, Jay is the head of that group, And what we did is CME has got a certification that's very similar to our certification. And so we said, those are things that our employers on this side of the border, we appreciate, and on your side of the border in Canada, they appreciate. Let's talk about how do we make those two things same enough that we know when you come across the border with a CME certification, we know what you know, and we can put you to work, and we can work with you on a more regular basis. Now, the problem with our certifications being slightly different is that the Canadians actually have a hands-on component that we do not have yet. So going across the border to the north is a little bit more difficult, which is always the hard way for me to send my product to when I was owned by a Canadian company. So what I wanted to do is just quickly give you a handful of things that benefit employers, and I hate PowerPoint, so there's not going to be one. But some of the things that employers value about what I would call harmonization. And I can give her that. So one is there's going to be reduced training costs because companies that have facilities on both sides of the border are going to have somebody that they train as the trainer. So you'll be able to send that person across the border as long as they're allowed to work in the other side of the border, or they're going to a sales meeting. Thank you. Somebody laughed at that joke. You deserve candy afterward. Remind me, I'll bring you a candy bar. A Kit Kat. Now you're getting picky. Okay. I'll bring you two. There's a whole row of them. Managers know what employees know. It's important regardless of which facility you're in. So that happens here between facilities in the U.S., but it needs to happen across the border. The flow of employees, the possible flow of employees, is really made smoother because you've got a baseline of knowledge and you've got a baseline of understanding. What's really neat about these two certifications that we've harmonized is that the first module that we work with is safety. We don't want anybody to get hurt. Regardless of whether you're Canadian or American, we don't want you to get hurt. So both of them have a significant safety portion. There's always goodness coming from cross-border cooperation. If we fight with each other, it's not easy to do business. When we cooperate with each other, it's always a good thing. The ISO registration system. Companies that use ISO registration, there are requirements within ISO for you to have proven that you have trained people. Proven is not an easy thing to do. In the old days with ISO, for my manufacturing friend, what we used to do is say, if you come to a meeting, you sign your name, that means you were trained. That's not the case anymore. Now what you've got to do is you actually have to prove that. And certifications are becoming the way to do that. And so regardless of which side of the border you're on, you're going to need to do that. Employers appreciate knowing that the playing field is level. There's nothing more frustrating than knowing that I'm holding my employees to a higher standard than some other company is holding their employees to. When my suppliers would come to me, we were an auto supplier, and we got all kinds of extra things put on us by the auto companies. When my customers would come to me, they would say, you have to do things this way. And then I would compete with somebody else who didn't have to do things that way, and I would get just destroyed on price. That's very hard for me. So if we're working across the border and we know the playing field is level, that's helpful. And then finally, a better trained workforce is always a competitive advantage for our region. It's good for us as Canadians and Americans, and eventually across the border to Mexico, for us to have a solid workforce. I spent the last 2 years working in workforce efforts out of DC, and I can tell you that that is the single most important asset that an area can have, is a solid workforce. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is you're here to work on cross-border cooperation, you're here to do things together. One of the places you need to do that is you need to do that in your certifications. And we're talking about two different models here. One model is they're going to develop certifications that work on both sides of the border because they're starting from ground zero. The other model, which you saw here with MSSC, is that we took a certification that was a solid certification in the US and a certification that was solid in Canada, and we came together and we talked through those and made sure that they were harmonized. So those are the two ways that we've seen, we've got experience with here in the US and Canada. So I would encourage you, if you want to do those kinds of things, to reach out to one of us and talk to us about how it worked for us. So with that, I'll give the candy bars and the microphone over to you.
Okay, so Scott basically stole my thunder because he summarized for me, so I don't have to do that. So, so now let's see if we have any questions from the floor or comments on certification, regulatory inefficiencies. Oh, okay. Let's see where she's going first. Do you guys have microphones?
So this question is for Michelle. I was wondering if you could compare UL and CSA, how much they collaborate and how much they compete. I noticed that you had the CSA US label on the screen. In the US, obviously, we're very familiar with UL.
I can hear you.
Okay. You know what, we do collaborate. UL does sit on some of our standards committees. We do test to UL standards. We do have, in Canada, our mark is more recognized, obviously. And then in the US, people go, well, we can't accept the Canadian standards mark, the CSA mark, that's wrong. So we do have, actually Lisa Ryheld is over there, she's got her hand raised. Her job is to go out, and it's a big education effort to say to AHJs and other government officials that here's what CSA does. And so it's, our mark is acceptable. So is there some collaboration with UL on some things, especially on the standard side? Yes. But is it an us against them versus them thing? I'm not sure if I would say that, but they are a competitor. They're, and they face the same thing when they go to Canada. Up in Canada, it's the CSA mark is what is accepted, but UL is starting to go up into that market. So it's a big education effort that we have some people taking on in the U.S. to educate people on what CSA is and what that mark is.
Hey, Scotty Greenwood, Canadian American Business Council. If I could just follow up to this line of discussion, we very much support the idea of standards harmonization. And in fact, we're calling for that. We were hoping that at the North American Leaders Summit, that would be something that would be addressed. And to our great delight, the trade ministers a couple of weeks ago said that Canada, the United States, and Mexico will look towards harmonization of voluntary standards. Now, what that means is there's a commitment at the highest level to do so. There's support from broad industry. The question I have for you on the stage and everybody in this room is, the way it will unfold is certain sectors will go first. People who are ready, sectors that are ready to say, you know what, we're going to harmonize for the sake of efficiency. And I just wonder if anybody has thoughts on which sectors are ready to go, less competitive with each other, more collaborative, or how we in the broader stakeholder world could be helpful. Thanks.
Either of you have a perspective on that? You work with a variety of industries, so you...
Yeah, well, from CSA's perspective, there are some of our standards that we publish that are already harmonized, and that they're currently being harmonized on the alternative fuels side, alternative energy side. And it's something that we are continuously working on. I can't say which industries are, like if we have in-house a priority, because we have so many standards that we publish, we rely on industry to come to us to say, gas appliances and accessories, we do have a few of those standards that are harmonized, and then we do have 2 technical committees. We have a U.S. technical committee and a Canadian technical committee that both work together. So they're separate, but they come together at least twice a year to meet, and they're aware of what's going on both sides. So.
And one thing that I would add to that is one of the issues we face here in the U.S. is that we have those thousands of certifications coming around. But there are a number of them that are generally nationally accepted. The MSSC, the AWS, some of the machining standards that you've got out there. And those are things that I think you can work across the border because they're generally the same kind of work from one place to the other. So rather than focusing on a specific industry per se, it may be easier to focus on some of these specific standards.
Hi, this may or may not be an issue, but it's a manufacturing question. I'm in the service industry, so I don't know. But I'm curious to know whether there's a difference between a country using the metric system and a country using the American/imperial system. And I'm reminded of that Mars probe that crashed because somebody programmed it in meters instead of feet.
As a manufacturer, it was always a struggle. When we supplied to the auto industry, they've gone metric. So we supplied everything to them in metric. We supplied to everybody else in imperial. What happened is that our people became pretty good at doing conversions in their head. So they knew where they were. We standardized products on the metric side and then on the imperial side. It's more work for the employees is really what it is.
Any other questions? Okay, so I think just to bring us back to first principles and our discussions this morning, as I said at the beginning of this is an example of ad hoc incrementalism. And as Joy was excited, I mean, I think everything has to happen at the bottom level. Business, private industry has to push forward the initiatives. But at the end of the day, Scott alluded to, you can have cross-border certification, but you still have to get your employees across the border. And so at some point, private business and government have to come together so that efficiencies can be implemented and actually work on the ground level. So that's our presentation today. Hope you enjoyed it.